Do you remember covering? Like, can you tell us what covering Linsanity was like? I'm sure that's exactly what you expected to be asked here right out the top of the gate was about Jeremy Lin.
I thought I heard Linsanity, and I was like, yeah, I saw him in Madison Square Garden. But
Mark feeling like Carmelo Anthony. I said, Mark feeling like Carmelo Anthony when talking about Jeremy Lin. Like, nah, that's ridiculous. 20 million a year. That's crazy.
I actually thought it was one of the most amazing 2 weeks for a player in NBA history. In terms of being undrafted, unheralded, and to do that in New York of all places was, I mean, it's worthy of a documentary, and they got one.
Yeah.
Like he should have retired after that. There's nothing he could do to even come close to matching that. Amazing.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny. He got a championship ring with the Raptors, but you wouldn't really know it because I think he might have played 10 seconds.
I didn't know that.
The Warriors in that series, but I believe he's an NBA champion.
Wow, I didn't know that at all, man. That we were just talking about that because they have I think you said a Tribeca documentary that's coming out, and I'd love to see that if there was any way I could see it, because it's if I told you about the story of Jeremy Lin, like, hey, like I'm telling my 9-year-old son about this, he wouldn't believe it. He'd be like, "Are you sure that's not a movie and not real life?" No, this was a real life thing that just happened organically in the middle of an NBA season.
Asian dude from Harvard, like you just, and he might have been the only Asian player in the league at the time.
Man, the way they was talking about it in the doc, man, that's if he wasn't the only, he was the biggest. No doubt about that. And Mark, as we transition,
no one was bigger than Yao Ming.
That's a true story. Yeah, like Yao, like people, like Yao opened doors for the NBA that weren't open before. Is that right?
Well, I mean, he was certainly the first prominent Asian player to make it to the NBA. And I tell people, anyone who's listening, like Yao was good. He was really good. I mean, he was one of the few people. I actually went to his NBA debut. One of the few people I've been around that made Shaq look small. And if he didn't get hurt, he would have went down as one of the greatest big men ever. Actually, was also funny enough to be a comedian. Really funny guy, and had some really good times with him. But to me, it's kind of interesting. Like I've been waiting for the next great Chinese player, and there's one really good player with G League Ignite right now. I saw a kid from Mongolia that was pretty good at the Hoop Summit. Not NBA good, but he was okay. But I would have thought that Yao Ming, especially after spending some time in Beijing and Shanghai, that Yao Ming's impact on Chinese basketball would have created a slew of stars like you're starting to see from Africa, that the African players have influenced. But it really has not worked out that way.
It's interesting you bring that up too, Mark, because you went. Forgive me if I don't have this right, but you went to Africa to see this league. I watched a little bit on the NBA TV in the last couple of months. How is that experience? How is that going with what the NBA is trying to do over there?
The Basketball Africa League is really cool, and that was an amazing experience. That certainly probably is like top 5 things that I've done. Including the Olympics, being at the bubble. What they're trying to do is that I think they've realized that Africa's going to continue to produce players, but imagine what they could produce if they had a better infrastructure. Most of the courts are outdoors with dust, right? Not a lot of gyms, and then not a lot of great coaching. So they're hoping that with such a massive continent that Africa is, that they could be the first to kind of like push the game there on a different scale, different level, and then ultimately, the NBA will benefit a lot from the players that will come from that.
Talking to our man Mark Spears.
But I keep interrupting you when you're saying my name, man. I'm messing up. That's the hard part.
I just love saying your name, man. It's Marc J. Spears. There's some power in that.
All right, there you go. Let me get out of y'all way. The Senegal was beautiful, man. It was for anybody thinking about, you know what, man, I'd like to take a trip to Africa.
Yeah.
That to me is a great place to start because it's Dakar is a 7-hour flight from New York City, and there's a beach town called Sali, which is amazing. I spent time there, and so you could go there, go to Dakar, go to Goree Island, which is certainly emotional. But
was that your first time there?
Recommend. I've been to Johannesburg before. I went to the NBA Africa game in 2017. So that was pretty great too. But I like both places, and obviously, as big as that continent is, there's a lot to see. I wish I was in Egypt right now for the second portion of the Basketball Africa League, and then the finals are in Kigali, Rwanda, at the end of next month. But this is playoff time, so I need to concentrate on that.
Yeah.
With that said, what's the most impactful injury we've seen so far? Luka, Book, Chris Middleton?
Oof. Well, final results on Middleton yet?
Not a length, but I mean, sprained MCL. That's at the very least he's not going to be 100%.
That is a really, really good question. Because Denver might say, "Well, what about our two guys?" Right? And Zion and New Orleans is like sad. It seemed like everybody, even the Warriors got Wiseman out. Everybody has something. But to me, the fact that the Suns, had the best record from beginning to end is not even no room for debate. They had an 8-game lead on Memphis, which had the second best record. If they lose in the first round because Book is out,
man,
huge disappointment for a franchise that's never won an NBA championship, who probably is the best team in their franchise history right now, including maybe Charles might debate that, right? But Cotton Simmons might debate that. But I mean, this team has got a good chance to win a title as any they've had, and then you got this Pelicans team that was like that pesky kid from Scooby-Doo, man. Like they're not supposed to be here. They barely got into the play-in. They barely got in the playoffs, and now they're, going back home for 2 games to a wild crowd in New Orleans with a split series and Brandon Ingram playing like what we hoped that he could play when he was drafted.
Yeah.
Like Brandon Ingram looks scary right now. So to answer your question, and especially since it looks like Luke is coming back, then there's Ben Simmons, right? I mean, it is.
Yeah.
I would say, I'd probably go Book.
Yeah. I think the Suns are in a little trouble without Devin Booker, and that's crazy to say because they're maybe the deepest team in the league. Chris Paul is phenomenal, but Devin Booker, that seems to be like the one position on that squad that they don't have a backup for. Like they don't have another shooting guard. They got threes, they got fours, they got another point guard. I don't feel like they might have somebody that can back up Devin Booker.
Well, I mean, not only back him up, but he gives you like 30 a night. Right? So it's like it's a different ball game with him, man. Like this is somebody that, in some people's mind, and maybe even mine, should have been MVP.
That is, and that's interesting because there was a lot of talk around Giannis last year about his lack of production in the playoffs influencing some voters in the MVP category. And now you got a guy who's probably going to win back-to-back MVPs. I don't know, Mark. It sure looks like he's going to be swept in the first round. I feel like these MVP conversations.
I don't think that Giannis is going to get it. I would say he probably finished third behind Joker.
Yeah, I think Jokic is going to get it. Jokic is going to get the MVP this year.
I mean, Embiid's in that mix too. So that'd be interesting to see how it shakes out. But I don't. Giannis cracks the top 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a betting man.
Well, you're a voting man, so I'll take.
No, I don't vote. I stopped voting.
You stopped on your own?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No. Hey,
I
Marc.
can explain it, but I don't know if you want to go.
No, I'm curious.
That.
No, I'm curious.
Yeah. No, I mean the reason why is I call it the Howard Beck rule. Howard Beck's writer from Bleacher Report. He several years ago he pushed for the Professional Basketball Writers Association to, be transparent and put our names on the voting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem with that is these votes also affect people's players' contracts, bonuses, different things that could give them. Like Klay Thompson was eligible for a bigger extension if he was All NBA, right? So now, if you're putting my name on something that affects somebody's money, I just don't think that's a good look as a journalist. If people know where I voted and it could affect, somebody's contract. And also, I know players. I've known players to look to see who votes for them, and if you didn't, and they see that you didn't, they hold that against you. So it's just like it's just not worth it for me anymore.
Yeah,
that's understood. We appreciate you, man. Thanks for fitting us into your schedule. I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about Boogie or not. I was just going to ask you how, what was your opinion on Boogie? Like, is he in a good spot? Is he in a good place?
You would let me go.
I was going to let you go. I didn't think you wanted to talk about DeMarcus.
Talk to us a little bit, Marc. Talk to us a little bit here.
Did we lose him?
No, I said, what's the question?
I mean, is it like he had a tone in your guys' conversation? Like, is he in a good spot? Is he in a good place? Man, he suffered setback after setback after setback. Just where's his head at?
I think the best way to say it is if you want to know how he feels, just ask him.
Yeah.
And that's how he feels. I mean, I will say this to Kings fans and the Kings organization. My expectation wasn't for it to be a Kings Planet thing at all. But with the questions I asked, that's kind of, where his emotions were. Because it's intriguing because he wants his jersey retired in Sacramento.
So that's
he didn't work out there, and the instability affected his career. And so I did ask him if there's anything about his career that he wished he changed, and he said working out there. So interesting, because I do think in terms of the Sacramento fans, there's no question he loves the city, which he gave a lot to off the court, and he loves the fans. It's just interesting that the impression that place made, because my intention also in talking to him was like just kind of looking back on that injury that he had in New Orleans and how much it affected his career. But I also think that the instability in Sacramento for years, he seemed to believe affected him perhaps just as much.
And it's interesting to hear you say he wants his jersey retired here in Sacramento. Did you take that as like he still does want it retired, or at one point he did? Because I feel
how he feels is how he feels, but he does also believe that he put up some nice numbers there and is deserving of that. So. I mean, I could understand that the Kings are like, well, why should we retire this dude's jersey after what he did, right? But what he did there is what he did there, right? I mean, he's had a great career. The best part of his career is in Sacramento. I think as time passes, perhaps he lets some things go, and maybe the Kings let some things go, but there's certainly some tough feelings on his part right now, which I understand.
He had a little moment with Vivek the last time he was here that caught all of our attention, but it sure sounds like even given the end of your conversation with him, he hasn't quite gotten over his issues with Vlade. He made nice with Vivek, but it felt like he still has some issues with Vlade. Say no more, dog. Say no more.
You know what? I mean, he didn't say any issues with Vlade. He just said if Vlade's in the Hall of Fame, he should be in the Hall of Fame too.
Do you think he's a Hall of Famer? Do you think Boogie's a Hall of Famer?
It's a really, really good question. When you look at, I think there's certain players, like if you look at Tracy McGrady, if you look at Mitch Richmond, if you look at Tim Hardaway, you look at what they did, how many times they were All-Stars, numbers they put up, it's going to be comparable to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had a stretch that went from Sacramento to him blowing his Achilles in New Orleans, where he was like as dominant as any big in the league. Before he blew his Achilles, he was the MVP candidate, been a 4-time All-Star. So I think you got to let the dust settle. You got to also remember when it comes to MVP, you got to look at the whole body of work. Mm-hmm. So he does have an Olympic gold medal. Mm-hmm. He played at Kentucky. Was a McDonald's All-American. So that, like, I voted 3 times. And when they send you the information, it's the whole body of work. So it's not just NBA. So he certainly is an intriguing candidate. And when you sit back and look at that whole body of work and consider the injury, there's a case he can make.
Yeah. I don't, this may sound a shade and I don't mean it as such, but I feel like Tim Hardaway is going to be the new bar, because I love Tim Hardaway. I think he was a great ball player. But when you look at the actual accomplishments and the stats and all this other stuff, I think Boogie in this particular case has a great case. If you're going to put Tim Hardaway in, that DeMarcus Cousins should get major consideration to getting in the Hall of Fame.
Well, you said it. You ain't getting me in trouble with Timmy.
Tim's my boy. Tim's my boy, man. Come on.
All right.
We appreciate you, Mark. Thanks as always, my man.
All right, y'all take care.